Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of Buy or Sell What the Hell. It is the 22nd of August. Hope everybody's doing well. I'm with Alec and Chris today. How are you guys doing?
Oh, I'm doing just fine.
And this
Just
is your
watch.
host, Jason. I kind of forget about myself.
Everyone should know you by now, right? But I don't think they know Chris. Chris has been in the markets for the last few years, right, Chris?
Yeah, I've started trading about 2 years ago. I've been in the cryptocurrency space since 2009, actually, with the
Oh,
original paper, and
man,
so I've been following it ever since.
that's not something that a lot of people can say. Well, a lot of people do say it, but
Been in a while.
yeah. I
Well,
mean,
I guess we'll get into markets. I mean, Chris, you have a lot of expertise. We'll talk about some other subjects. I'll just hit on kind of what we see going on, what we're doing trading wise. I think, I like to start top down when we look at different coins or different assets, or whatever it is we're trading. But then even when we look at the overall markets and global macro. And so this week, this is Tuesday, we actually had a big rally in the euro off of 113 to 116 and very fast, momentous move. We've been very bullish the dollar for most of this year, and we've had some pretty good gains. And then had to play a lot of defense this week. We were still course short, but you got to kind of protect yourself a little bit when you get a squeeze like this. It seemed like everybody was kind of short um, euros and pretty crowded long dollars right onto the lows, which is pretty typical. Just like we have a very crowded short bond position right now. And then this week also we had for the first time a net short position. If you look at the commitment of traders report, first time we were short gold position right into the lows also. So that tends to how it works, right? I mean, people chase low, they chase high. Even the professionals do it, and sure enough, that was pretty much the low in gold also. And we've had a not a huge bounce, but that's kind of what I saw going on this week. A lot of positioning where I think people kind of got complacent on dollar longs, and
mhm.
so we had a pretty big snapback. As far as Bitcoin goes, it's been really quiet. I kind of want your guys' take, but it's we've just been going sideways, very similar to June and July with low volume, low energy, and then overnight we finally kind of broke through that 6,700, kind of testing the 6,800 area, and maybe we can start kind of an intermediate term rally
Mhm.
if we kind of get some follow through.
Yeah, I mean, I think like you said, all these other markets, the shorts began to get pretty crowded down here, and we saw the peak amount of Bitcoin shorts on Bitmain or BitMEX, and we just kind of saw a squeeze again. I think they actually went down, right? I think just read that in the news, right?
Oh, you mean as far as their shutdown? Yeah, Chris, you got some more details on that.
Yeah, so last night the big candle that we saw coincided almost exactly with the downtime on BitMEX, which is when we saw that big candle up to, I think on BitMEX while it was down, we got all the way up to 7,100.
Hmm.
Uh, and then as soon as it opened back up, that's when we got that push back down to about 67. And the other thing that goes into that is, the shorts are basically at an all-time high. So it's kind of, it might be coincidental that that all happened at the exact same time, but it was kind of a result of what's been going on.
Yeah, I can't say that being coincidental. The shorts were most vulnerable, right? When they closed down for maintenance, there wasn't as much pressure short, and I think people saw the opportunity there, and put their positions in. And we got that squeeze.
I mean, I guess so. If you play that kind of, um, if you go with that narrative, then I guess so. If you know in advance, did people know in advance that they were going to be down?
Oh, I don't
Yeah,
know about that. Jeez.
I think it was actually part of their scheduled maintenance that was announced, so people did know
So
beforehand.
okay, well that makes sense. And so that majority of people that are playing short crypto is on is on BitMEX.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You could be short the futures, which is different. I don't think the majority of retail is playing in the future space. But yeah, I guess that makes sense. If you know all the shorts are going to be down via maintenance and they can't cover, and then these guys come in and buy up the market in the cash market, or the futures. It would be interesting to see. I mean, the futures started to move at about 9. Let
Hmm.
me get a little bit more zoomed in on the 15-minute chart. This happened, and the futures really took off at 8:45
Hmm.
last night. So that
What's
yeah, we were at 6,400, 6,450. And yeah, to your point, Chris, futures traded almost to 6,900, 6,880,
mhm.
basically in 30 minutes.
Yep. And I did confirm, so they did announce that they were going to have that scheduled downtime 5 days ago. So there was plenty of time for people to get prepared for that.
Mhm.
That definitely sounds like the games that are getting played in the space right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm kind of curious what sort of games are going to lead to the next run up here. We saw a squeeze of about, was it $400 or a little bit more than 400?
Yeah. So, I mean, we started right around 64.50
Mm-hmm.
last night, and then it varied across exchanges, but we got right up to about 6,900. So it was about 450, $500 squeeze.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Interesting.
Well, and then Alec, to your point, when you look at the record shorts across a couple of those exchanges, I think we were mostly looking at Bitfinex, was one of the charts we were looking at yesterday, but it's the same amount of shorts that we had in April, and we had the same big short squeeze there that led to a pretty good rally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in April, and after that squeeze, I mean, we went back to almost 10,000. So this is good for the bulls. This is the first time we've had a higher high since literally the middle of July. So let's hopefully we get some follow through here into the end of the week.
All right. So taking that into account, and what happens if we do end up getting a much bigger follow through, right? We break that, psychological level of, whatever that may be, 10, or I don't even think it's going to be that high until, we start, everyone starts FOMOing back in. We've seen this over and over again. It's just that same cycle, and it's just what's it gonna take to break it? So what? So say that this little short squeeze turns into something a little bit bigger. How do you see yourself playing it? And or maybe well, let's just start. How did you end up? How did you end up, guys, playing the last run up? Was that in fall? And are you doing anything differently in preparing for this next one? Do you think it's going to be different? I know there's a lot of questions, but
Yeah, Chris, why don't you go first? You've seen a couple more of these kind of intermediate term, several month pullbacks, and then big moves to new highs. I mean, you've been trading this longer than we have, so.
Yeah, I'm still actually holding a pretty sizable core long position, mostly because I haven't had as much time to really be playing these shorter intermediate term trends. But
Mhm.
back when we went down, what was that? Early August, and we got below 6,000. I went almost, I'd say probably about 80% back in. And off of this, I pulled some out last night. Actually, I took some off the board just because kind of waiting to see what's going to happen. We do have the ETF ruling coming up. So depending on that, we might see a break one way or the other. And I don't want to be all in either way,
Yeah.
just to kind of play defense until we get a little bit more confirmation
mm-hmm.
in markets.
Man, I was excited about that ETF at first, and then this whole thing just getting, I think, overblown now. Is it going to happen? Is it not? Is it going to happen? I think it goes back and forth, yes, no, from a sentiment perspective every day, multiple times. It's that whole, is China going to ban Bitcoin over and over?
Mm-hmm.
It's just, it's,
And that's the thing. It's almost not necessarily even strictly responsible for the market shift, but it's almost like a psychological thing.
Uh-huh.
And like you said, when you referenced last year when we had all the China FUD coming out, that didn't have a huge impact on the market. It was more of a psychological game, and people got wrapped up in that, and that's the deciding factor. It's like you have all these other components going on in the market space, but people just latch onto the ETF, and that's the make or break. So whether that happens or not, long term, does that have a huge impact on the market? Well, not too sure. If you look at gold, once ETFs opened up on gold, we saw a huge run up. So you could argue that that might be something that happens with Bitcoin, but at the same time, Bitcoin's still going to be getting used. The market's still going to exist. It's not just going to evaporate overnight if the ETFs don't get approved. So,
yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, whether the ETF is this week or 6 months from now, it's going to happen, and it's just, this is a brand new asset class. It just takes time. I've said on this podcast before, when they first started the spiders, there was the lady that started that. They also tried to get the first gold ETF approved, and it was a nightmare. I mean, it took years for them to get that through.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to take some time. I think the market is kind of anchored on the news catalyst, but Alec, you asked, what's it going to take? Sometimes it's just the cycle itself is the catalyst for the market to move. And what I mean by that is, just by the nature of, the faster you accelerate, the higher the probability is that you're not going to be able to improve on that acceleration in rate of change terms. So just like we talk about in the U.S. stock market and U.S. growth, we've accelerated for 8 quarters. That was one of the longest streaks, I think, since maybe back to 91 when we came out of recession. And so when you compare that, when you're going to compare all this earnings growth and all this rapid GDP growth, it's very hard for this time next year to be accelerating beyond the fact that how much we accelerated, these last 8 quarters. So just by the sheer math of it all, you should probably slow just because you have a harder comparable period to beat. Well, you look at the crypto markets here. I mean, I was just looking at Litecoin. We've retraced 100% of the move when we last broke out from 50.
Mm-hmm.
So just the nature of how much we've retraced, that's actually the catalyst for the market to turn back up. Is the further you swing the pendulum, then the more energy builds for it to swing back the other way. So I don't even think it's necessarily as much about what news is coming as much as about, it's just time for the market to turn up. And we were 8.6 months down from the high. That's a pretty major cyclical frequency throughout nature, throughout science, physics. So I think it's more about a timing thing, and I think this back half of the year is kind of shaping up like we're probably due for a rally. To make everybody chase, I think clearly this pivot, this lower high pivot, is around 8,000 now. First, it was at 12,000. We've ratcheted that down in February, made another lower high in April and May at 10,000. And then this last significant longer term lower high was last month. So that's right at 8,000. I think you get through there, and then you get through 10,000, and the media, people are going to, it's going to be more in the forefront of people that are late. And I think that's when the momentum will pick right back up.
Mm-hmm.
When you are
but
right,
I think it's smart, Chris. Like you said, you don't have to be all in here. I mean, there's always, anything can happen. If you do break 6,000, I mean, we've been trying to keep a little bit of cash too to nibble on some of these alts. I mean, I didn't think Litecoin would be back at 50, but it is. Same thing with Ether. So I don't.
Well, and the other thing is, to go with what you said, Jason, we've kind of been seeing this tightening spring where, we hit a low back in January of about 5,800. We haven't really been able to get lower than that on all these pullbacks, and so we're just getting those lower highs, but we're not pushing that lower low down, which is just kind of tightening and tightening and tightening. And so I think once we do see that momentum come back, it'll come back pretty strong. Yeah,
no, definitely. It's nice to see that floor really solidifying itself. There's got to be so much institutional money that needs to come in and that needs to have some exposure to this asset class that I mean, they've got several chances to buy down here.
Hmm.
They're just missing the momentum. That'll come back. It's just time and price type of thing.
You know,
What do
I
you guys
think
think about the alts though? We've really seen a break longer term on a lot of altcoins. I mean, they've been technically bearish on the weekly and monthly, whereas Bitcoin still hasn't broken down in our model on the weekly level. But these alts are, some of them are obviously at rock bottom lows. You can't get much lower. We're just talking about Cardano's below 10 cents. I mean, you got tiny risk reward to zero as long as you think Cardano's going to be around, which we do. You're getting a chance to really pick up some stuff. I mean, really,
mhm.
really cheap here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's they can only go so low on a percentage basis, and they've dropped so much off the lows. It's kind of a no brainer on a lot of these.
Yeah.
We haven't really seen them. A lot of them get washed out yet. Even the worst ones are still hanging on there. So I don't know what that means, and if we're going to be going any lower. But yeah, I mean, I think we're just gonna see that same cycle repeat itself, where all the money gets sucked right back into Bitcoin. Bitcoin being the most sound money there is for cryptocurrencies, and maybe any. But everyone, the faith of how the security of Bitcoin just kind of sucks everything back in. Bitcoin will see that possibly break up, hit that 8 pivot you were talking about, and people use their profits from that to spread it back to all those altcoins. And we've seen that cycle so many times now that when we're in a market like this, we see Bitcoin dominance. I know we talked about dominance before, where you really can't gauge it that well, especially with all these coins making value out of nothing. But these inflated numbers don't make any sense for market cap, but it's the only metric we have right now. So Bitcoin is hitting like 50% dominance again. Last time we saw that breaking above there, we saw the last run up, and then the subsequent cycle down, where everyone spread their profits to all these different coins because they have all these extra this extra cash on hand, and they're willing to take some risks.
Yeah, that makes
Right
sense.
now, no one wants to risk it. If they're down, let's put it into the safest, most secure, asset there is in the space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I think one more point too is that I think a lot of people are talking about, like you mentioned, the institutions coming back in, institutional money coming in, and what that means for the next run up. Where I still don't think we've seen the peak of what like true fear of missing out is for like the the retail investor. When you think about how many speed bumps there were for that last run up to 20,000, how many speed bumps in that road there were for the retail investors.
What do you mean
Where,
by speed bumps?
well, so just trying to get an account. So say they're tech savvy enough to understand that the stuff has potential. They're savvy enough to have, I mean, not even savvy, but they even have the time to learn about keeping your own wallet and everything. But besides that, just creating an account on Coinbase, right? The absolute easiest thing to do. Make an account on Coinbase. You have to upload your ID, pictures. Some exchanges even have to have you verify yourself on a webcam. I mean, a few exchanges, that took me weeks. So that's a few weeks right there. Then once you're approved, what can you buy? Like $500 worth of Bitcoin? You have to wait a few more weeks, or you have to do a bank transfer, which takes a few weeks. So that's a few more weeks of buying only a few $100s worth of Bitcoin. So I can't see. I mean, I don't even think we weren't even able to hit full speed on a road with so many speed bumps.
Yeah, I agree. And to me, it's like the mainstream. I think Bitcoin kind of finally hit the forefront of people's, the
Mm-hmm.
main names, Main Street. It was in front of people finally
Yeah.
for the first time. But I don't think a lot of people participated. I mean, I have people calling me up out of nowhere at 19,000 buying, saying, "Hey, how do I get involved?" And you knew that they were, they were coming. But I think this time again, when the market starts to take off, people will be like, "Oh man, now I'm okay. I heard about it. I watched it. Now it's taking off again." I think you're right. We're going to see even more chasing,
You know, and
and the
one more.
institutions are going to
Go
be
ahead.
scrambling to chase too this time.
Yeah, yeah. And one more thing too now is that right now through Fidelity, I think everyone's waiting for this ETF, but you can right now add Bitcoin to your 401k.
Oh, really?
Through Fidelity, yeah. They ended up partnering with an existing. I forgot what the platform was that offers it, but Fidelity is now going to be offering that service to their clients. So,
So,
which I don't, I'm surprised I haven't heard more news on that, but everyone's just sticks to that one talking point of the ETF this, ETF that, and just go
I
through
don't
the cycle.
institutions are moving fast enough because I think like we talked about this 8.6 cycle and how September is kind of shaping up for maybe the longer term turn. If that really starts to go and we do get higher highs above 8, 10,000, it's going to go quick. And I'm not sure all these institutions that they think they've got time right now. I think they're going to be kind of scrambling to get their compliance and everything in order so they can really take advantage of it.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see. What did you guys want to hit on in the news?
Well, since we're talking about sound money, Bitcoin, that whole cycle of, you know, picking the safest asset in a down market like this and seeing Bitcoin dominance rise, uh, you see some unsound money happening around the world, such as Venezuela, right? I think everyone's probably read that news by now, but I think a few days ago the government anchored their minimum wage to their I can't even say cryptocurrency. It's a digital currency, I guess. The petro. So the minimum wage is like half a petro, point 0.5 petro, which is like what 30 USD per month. Before it was like $1 per month. So
They're
everyone
just
now
throwing
has
stuff against the wall. I think they're completely confused. They have no idea what they're doing.
yeah.
And this is just it's they're completely gone. What the government's trying to do is a joke. That's too bad for those people. I mean, I hope they're long crypto.
Yeah.
Inflation
Yeah.
is insane. And then we've seen the same thing. I think you were going to talk about the lira, Alec, and we've been long dollars and short the lira, and I think that's a huge pain point in the markets. And people want to say, "Oh, it's tiny compared to China," but that they don't have to understand the contagion. I mean, there's a lot of people that have exposure that have lent money to Turkey. The banks in Europe already have a ton of issues with the whole design structure of the euro, and um, so it doesn't take much to see a lot of risk there. And I think it starts in the European banking system. We've been pretty bearish that whole EU story situation for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's for, like you said, sound money. I mean, just bring up the chart of Venezuela's, fiat, bring up a chart of the lira. It's all a confidence game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's been a few articles, claiming that, Venice, digital currencies are, or cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are, making a huge rise in, Venezuela because of this. I don't know if I see that, but I think it's just kind of sensational headlines or feel good sort of thing, because I just can't see people that are forced to trying to buy anything they can on the streets just to survive, worrying about or trying to figure out or even having the time to understand concepts like what Bitcoin can offer them. But I'm sure the percentage of users has risen, and at least there's an option now for them. But it's kind of sad to see something like this happening now when the infrastructure is still being really fleshed out, and people are still being educated on what Bitcoin is and what it can offer. It's just sad to see that it's happening now when everything's still ramping up for for this whole Bitcoin movement.
I think it's very reminiscent of last year with all of the news with Korea going on, and I'm sure you guys remember, but through a majority of 2017, the exchange rate for BTC to the Korean won was just astronomically high compared to the rest of the world. I mean, it was on the magnitude of 25-30% higher retail value. And if you look at it now that I would say political instability has cooled off with North Korea, I don't know if you guys even keep track of this, but the exchange rate against the Korean won is almost back to even with the rest of the world. And so anytime we see that sort of instability, whether it's war-based in the case of North Korea, or just economic, such as Venezuela, or the even bigger issues going on with the lira, people are getting the message of, I need to move into something that's not just going to tank overnight. And the fact that they do have this digital option now through cryptocurrency, I think it's an empowering aspect of what Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, for that matter, can offer. But like you said, Alec, the infrastructure is not necessarily there, and you have to think of, okay, how easy is it for the average person to really start trying to squirrel away what they do have? It is a bit of a barrier to entry still. So if we can get that taken care of on the cryptocurrency front, whether it's things like Lightning Network or any of these other proposed solutions, it just makes adoption that much easier and that much more of a norm, not just the people that are at the forefront of trying to get into this space, but it's a common man sort of event to buy cryptocurrency.
Yeah, that's interesting. That I don't know how big of a market, how big of a trend that is. That's an interesting metric with Korea that you brought up. That's I'd really love to see how big of a trend that is, but I don't think that's really that important because we still are so early. I think it's just important that there is a trend there, that we are seeing a correlation to what you're talking about, the instability, and people are already viewing Bitcoin as that sound money or that escape from the system they're currently in. And I think that's what's important. I see all these headlines, like I brought up earlier, that Venezuelans are they're rushing to Bitcoin. Well, I don't know how many of them are really doing that, but the fact that there's a trend, going upwards, that people are adopting it higher than the rate of other countries is interesting in itself.
For sure. Well, I think you're going to see too, that's a great use case. If you take a country like that's had their economic and monetary system just collapse, you could come in. That's a great opportunity for crypto to come in and be a new, different solution. I know there's some guys that actually got kind of backed by the Dash Group, and I forget which country they're doing that on, but there is a lot of people going across the border, and they're trying to help them set up and onboard them in crypto and show them the value of, they know what a paperback debt-based socialist fiat system looks like. And I think, if you can't grow the crypto monetary solution in that environment, then you're gonna have a tough time trying to get mainstream. You're gonna have a tough time getting adoption in these developed.
Yeah,
I think it's a good opportunity.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. That's why it's so exciting just to see any sort of trend there. It doesn't matter how big it is. The fact that there is a trend already, and we're still so early, is so exciting, I think. And let's just kind of leave this at this last question here before we wrap it up. We've been trying to keep these podcasts a little shorter, easier to digest, especially when we're talking markets. A lot of these numbers, it's hard to keep everything straight, what we're talking about in large doses. So say this trend does continue, this short squeeze turns into a bigger one. and we start seeing the start of the next bull run, or maybe we already have. But what are you doing? What sort of advice would you have specifically for like a run up? What would you be watching out for, or how would you be considering managing your risk, or any tips?
I think the biggest thing is when we've had these shallow rallies, when you come off the bottom, it's easy to be quick to just take everything off, and then you actually lose your position and the market screams. So there's some things that you can do. I mean, this is kind of why we have our crypto team, to help people with the timing, but just kind of, there's also a lot of tricks to do to sit down on your position, and how to add and reduce around a core position, and what we call let the market take you out. But I think that's the biggest thing, is that kind of knowing when there's a difference between rallying to lower highs, and then actually when you start making higher highs, you can be more aggressive, and you got to let it run. Because I think you'll see a lot of people, all these rallies have been 1,000 points, 2,000 points, and then they back down. And so it's kind of natural that as the market starts to go, there'll be a lot of people that sell 10,000, and then it goes through there and they won't get back in. I think that's the biggest risk on the new bull market, is people lose their position.
Okay.
They just out of everything.
That's interesting. I mean, that kind of just goes into the philosophy of keeping that core position really as long as you possibly can when it comes to something so fresh and bullish of an asset like Bitcoin and crypto is.
Well, and it's easy. I mean, it's still a great return if you double your money, right? I mean, you go if you're long at 6,000, you go to 12. Wow, I doubled my money. But you got to realize is that this market can make new higher highs. So I try to remind myself, but take that perspective. Even on these alts, like some of this stuff for 10, 20, 30 cents, they've already traded to $1. But you got to realize if BTC can make a new higher high, which is a long runway. So yeah, you made your money, you doubled, but there's lots of times we've seen BTC go 10x, and I think you're going to see a lot of these altcoins actually make higher highs too, which is hard for people to imagine. And again, there are going to be people making 100% off these lows, but there's going to be 1,000% to make on some of this stuff. So that's kind of the thing that we work on a lot with traders is, hey, keep your core position. You don't need to be all in, all out. But anyway, Chris, what were your final thoughts on that?
No, I agree. The concept of letting the market take you out is something that is very foreign to a lot of traders. Even to myself, I have a tendency to just, secure profits. No one loses money taking profits. And I've been burned on that several times in the past. The most recent one was with the whole Z Classic run up. I bought in at about $4 a piece, and then I took it off at I think 10. I was like, oh man, this is great. I just made great profits on that. And then we had a run up to $250, which stung a lot. And so just the idea of, try and keep your core position. Don't jump out. Don't jump ship too early. You have to really time the market and look at where things are going. Just because you have that initial run up doesn't mean take everything off at 10K. Just because that's where we got before, you have to look at what the follow through is off of that.
Right. I mean, you can book. I like to always take some off into the big number or big resistance, and then if you get through, you just put some right back on. But that's kind of, I think, tough for people to do psychologically. They sell, it moves higher on them, and then they're gun shy to get back in. They never get the chance, and next thing you know, you get another double from there, and all the anxiety that comes with that. But well, good episode, guys. Chris, thanks for hopping on. I'm sure you'll be on a lot more as we're working a lot more together. But yeah, you guys follow us along if you're kind of wondering what team it is that we're talking about during the show. If you go to our digital asset management firm is blockedgecapital.com, and on the right hand side there's some of our educational products that we do around our trading model. We have a chat room that's free to join, and then we also have a paid crypto room in there. So that's kind of the easiest way to get involved. Um, what else, Alec?
And if you're not even interested in the room or don't really, care too much, but you do want to hear these shows and you like what we're doing, just give us a follow on Twitter at buy or sell WTH is the handle. Buy or sell what the hell. And we, post all the shows on there when the next ones are going live, topics, and all that good stuff. So be sure to give us a follow.
All right, good.
And until next time.
Until next time, good luck out there.